views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, it is time for the Bronx Buzz. Nice to see you this evening. And on the Bronx Buzz, we talk to journalists and writers and photographers and videographers and sometimes filmmakers. And we talk about all the things they're doing to cover our borough of the Bronx, get a little insight as to what they're thinking about and what they're saying and what goes into what they do. And this evening we are very thrilled because we have a young journalist who is a graduate of the Columbia School of Journalism. She is involved in a very interesting teacher fellowship program, and she also wrote a fascinating story about the borough of the Bronx that also was done for WNYC, so there was an audio version of that. And it is my pleasure to welcome Sharon Lurye to the program. Nice to have you with us.
Hello, so nice to be here.
So before we get into this really, I think really a very important story, talk to me a little bit about you. Now, you always wanted to be a journalist. You somehow decided, maybe I'll do this. Tell us how you came to the point where you did go to the Columbia J School to get into this crazy, crazy business.
Yeah, well, I wanted to be a journalist since around ninth grade. So after, I didn't major in journalism in college, but I did work as a journalist for 2 years in New Jersey and Philadelphia. But I also was always really interested in education and teaching, so I was kind of reaching a point where I was trying to decide, do I want to be a journalist or do I want to be a teacher? So I tried being a teacher for a year, but the year I was a teacher, I also founded the middle school student newspaper, and I realized that I was more deeply passionate about like editing articles about the homecoming dance
Then you were teaching, yeah.
So I thought, this is probably a sign I should choose journalism. So after that, I moved to New York City. I attended the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism.
Right.
Which was a one-year program, and there are a lot of really great fellowships that are available to graduates of Columbia, and I joined one which is called the Teacher Project.
Excuse me, how interesting, because I was going to mention, when you mentioned Teacher Project, it does still combine the two kind of instincts that you originally had.
Yeah, it's not like just something for former teachers or something like that, but it's a project that writes about teachers and students and education. All across America. So basically the way the fellowship works is, I've just been working for, I've been working in the Columbia for a year, and we choose basically stories about education to write, and then we partner with different outlets all across the country. So right now, we are actually focusing on a special series, the Immigrant Student Series. And
how timely.
Yeah, exactly. That, after Trump was elected, we thought it would be a really good thing to talk about. And so my colleagues have, the other fellows in the Teacher Project, they've written stories for this series on, a Rohingya refugee in Chicago, an undocumented teen in Indiana, a Haitian immigrant student in Florida. So they've written about
the whole spectrum of immigrants. And listen, there are an endless number of stories. And you came upon this fascinating story, and I've got a photograph here of the young man who is now 18 years old, living in the Bronx. And so here's, I'm going to lay it out, and then we'll let Sharon go through it, is that we're talking about the separation of families. Maybe a parent gets deported, and what is the result of that? What happens to that, and what happens to the people who are living through it? So why don't you, and this was what was done in an audio version on WNYC. Maybe before I even ask you about the subject matter, how did the relationship with NYC happen? Did they say, "Ooh, good story," or did you go to them, or what really happened there?
Yeah, so I was, looking for a story to do for this immigrant student series, and you know, I found Hisham. He's a student who attends international.
Hisham Al-Amari.
Yes, Hisham Al-Amari.
From Yemen.
Yeah, so he grew up in Yemen. He left when the civil war there broke out in 2015, and then he lived as a refugee in Jordan for a number of years. It was really a worldwide odyssey. He went from Yemen to Jordan, then he went to the African nation of Djibouti, and then finally he made it to the United States where his father lives. And his mom was going to follow just a few months later. Literally, she was just waiting for her visa to be printed. It had been approved and everything. And then, you know, President Trump's travel ban went into effect. So
here's a real life effect of that on a young Bronx man.
Mm-hmm, yeah, exactly. And so he has not seen his mother in 2 years.
Right. And the status of his father?
His father is actually a U.S. citizen.
So that at the moment is not a problem.
Yeah. So
and what about his own situation? Is he secure in being here?
Yes, he's secure in being here.
So then what is this story to tell about him that was so compelling?
Yeah, so the reason I found his story really compelling is that, you know, we're hearing a lot about separations that happen at the border, and that's a very important story to tell for obvious reasons. But there's other kinds of family separations that happen too. It's not the same thing as, you know, a child being ripped from his mother's arms, but this is its own kind of separation. And I was just really, you know, I saw really how this was heartrending for the family. But also I was really interested in telling the story because he goes to a very interesting school, International Community High School in the Bronx, and all the students at the school, in order to qualify to be in the school, they have to have been in this country less than 4 years, so they're all immigrants.
And they all have stories like this, I'm willing to bet.
Yeah, you know, everyone in the school, they have probably a pretty compelling life story.
Well, excuse me, for a journalist, what a place to visit, because everywhere you turn, you could interview somebody who's got an incredible story to tell.
Exactly. And the school, the people who work at the school are really nice. They really welcomed me in and were totally comfortable with, you know, a journalist just showing up in class and observing. And I was just really interested in his relationship with his teachers, especially, you know, one teacher in particular became like a second mom to him, you know, here in the United States, and I thought that was very sweet and poignant. So I really also wanted to show how, like, you know, this school is just trying to be there for its students and what it's doing to, you know, help this particular community.
What about I'm always interested in the nature of media and which media applies. What about the nature of, I mean, because it's written, but what about the nature of turning it into an audio story? Was that a challenge for you? Was that the first time you'd ever done anything like that? Just talk about the difference in the type of media and what it allowed you to communicate.
Yeah, originally I was going to just write this as a print story, but, you know, I happened to be taping some interviews for my own notes, and when I was listening back to them, I mean, just the audio was so strong because you could hear the emotion in, you know, Hisham's voice, his father's voice, and so I was like, you know, this would be really good as an audio story. I've done a couple audio stories for, you know, different radio stations before. This was a challenge because Hisham does not actually speak he speaks English, but not very much.
Haltingly, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I don't speak any Arabic at all. So, you know, that was a challenge because how do you get something on the radio that's going to be bilingual? And in fact, I went to a radio workshop then the person leading the workshop has a Spanish language podcast, so I asked him, like, oh, how do you do a bilingual, you know, audio story? And he said, you don't. Like,
well, you know what's again, media is always interesting to me, and it is kind of the backdrop for this program. And that is that it used to be if you were a print journalist, that's what you did. And if you were a video journalist or even a talk show host, that's what you did. But in this day and age, you can't just, with all the different types of media, with social media, you can't just be one of those. You have to understand the various crossovers. So, frankly, good for you.
Thank you.
So let's, in the little time we have left, let's just talk about, number one, what's his future like? Is Mom ever coming back, or coming over here? We don't really know.
Well, she's been trying for 2 years to get a waiver to the travel ban, but that's really hard to get. Only 6%, I think, of people who have been applied.
So I don't want to pursue that any further, mostly because I just want to know, what about you? What's next for you?
Oh, actually, I did want to add something, though.
Sure.
So there's the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York, and they're doing a lawsuit on behalf of people like her who, you know, they're related to U.S. citizens.
And they have families, et cetera.
Yeah.
And what about for you? What's next for you?
Well, so the fellowship is ending at the end of this month, and after that, I will be on the lookout for
more work.
For a new job. Yeah.
Well, listen, we hope it takes you through the borough of the Bronx and through this program once again. You're a great guest. You're a serious journalist, and this is the kind of person we need more of covering the borough of the Bronx. What a fascinating story. His name is Hisham Alamari. And let's wish him and his family good luck. And thank you for your time.
Oh,
Great.
Thank you so much.
There you go, Sharon Lurye. We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to go on the telephone to the Bronx Times, and we'll get some inside word with our buddy Robert Wirsing, who's the photo editor, not the assignment editor, the photo editor over there at the Bronx Times. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do-It-Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Hey, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and really enjoyed our time with Sharon because, you know, interviewing young journalists who have an interesting point of view about the borough of the Bronx is always exciting, but also interviewing old hands, people like my buddy Robert Wirsing, who's over there. He's the photo editor at the Bronx Times Reporter. So let's say good evening to our buddy Robert Wirsing. We got Robert on the phone, do we?
Here
There he is.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Robert. Robert, let's just talk about in general, and you know I always like to talk about one of my favorite publications, the Bronx Times. There has been so much material in there, and you know I've been reading this paper for decades, and it's just never been so chock full. You must be a very busy guy because there are just a zillion photos that are in that paper.
Yeah, I'm very busy actually. As a matter of fact, usually summer is our busiest because there's just so much going on. Like you have a lot of like annual events, like even like little things too, like summer block parties, like throughout neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you know, it really is, when you flip through the paper, you really get a sense of, you know, a borough that's really alive, that you get, you know, kind of like everything that is going on in the borough. Here's a really bad question. Do you really edit and say, well, we're not going to use this, or really any photo of a really good community event? I guess the Bronx Times is happy to put that out, right? I mean, that's the whole idea, right?
Yeah, I mean we're pretty much like happy to put out like any like real like interesting like community events like block parties, or if there's like concerts that that people are putting on like over here in Bronx, like they have the Bronx Underground concerts over at the First Lutheran Church.
Mm-hmm.
So we like always go out and cover like a lot of like really like interesting diverse like events like happening throughout the Bronx, really.
Tremendous, Robert. It really has been great coverage, and as I said, the paper is just absolutely chock full, not only with the photos, but of course with news. Do you like, now you go out and cover stories periodically. You have a preference of what you like? You like to go out and cover stories? You like to, you know, do the photos, or all of the above? Just curious about you as a journalist and photojournalist, what your interests are.
Sure. Well, I would say like really like all of the above. Although like since I do a lot of photos, there's usually not really like enough time for me to go out to really cover events a lot. But I do like every like so often like go out and actually do cover events. But most of the time it's like over the phone or just like following up like for stories. But yeah, I really do enjoy doing everything, like especially like working with the photos, assigning out photographers to cover the events, like really capture like the essence of the events that are happening.
And also the essence of our wonderful borough of the Bronx. Let's talk about a couple of things. You covered the Sawmill Park, right? Sawmill Park. Talk about that event, why that was so interesting and important to the people in that community.
Sure. Pretty much this was an important event because a lot of people were looking forward to the park being rebuilt. And it's finally open. It actually opened just in time for summer. It opened Friday, June 7th. So it was like really like just before summer began. And it features like all these new things like for local residents to really enjoy, like a new revamped basketball court, new play equipment, even like youth fitness equipment too. So like you could actually exercise there.
Do you know how long they were without a park? I mean, that kind of thing, I have to say, as a Bronxite, just disturbs me. Every neighborhood needs to have a nice park. So do you know how long they were waiting for this to happen?
Yeah, so they were actually, they didn't officially break ground until July 24th, 2017. So pretty much from that time all the way up until June 7th of this year, they actually have not had a park.
Wow. What neighborhood was that? What neighborhood is it?
This is in Mott Haven. So the Mott Haven community, most notably PS 369, PS 352 and PS 179, all those students there, like they were just without a park.
That's just it's terrible. But of course, I guess all's well that ends well, and it's great. I mean, there's the picture of I guess the ribbon cutting and all that kind of stuff. That's always good to hear. The other, or I should not the other, but another story that you did, which I really loved, and when I saw it, I was like, wow, this is exactly what we want to do in the Bronx. Was this idea of using a local artist to make murals to paint over graffiti and beautify the neighborhood over in Van Nest. Talk to me a little bit about that. And I guess what I'm really looking for is why can't we do this everywhere?
Yeah, so this was a very interesting story. So the local artist, Lovey Pignata, she's a Pelham Parkway resident, and she's very well known too. Like she's most notably known for her daylighting art installation that was on display in Virginia Park from June 2017 to June of 2018.
She also, I have to tell you, she also, I haven't seen if it's still active, but she also runs Morris Perk, which is kind of a coffee program, but that's another story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was actually Lovey's idea. She came up to Community Board 11, and Community Board 11 had a lot of issues with this particular area, right near 1600 Adams Street.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a very like industrial, not very residential neighborhood. So a lot of like that particular location was just getting tagged like constantly with graffiti, and the board actually paid FedCap like a total of $999.98 this past
And
January.
98 cents, thank you.
Yeah.
That's a real journalist, ladies and gentlemen. He got the numbers right. Go ahead.
This past January to clean up that graffiti, but unfortunately it just came back like right afterwards.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Lovey like decided, hey, you know, why don't I just create a mural? That way like, it can help deter the graffiti. So the community board was very much on board with that, and they let her create actually two murals. There's the one that's actually of the fish that inhabit the Bronx River, and then there's also another one which is called East Tremont, which is of course a play on East Tremont.
Oh, it's Tremont, I get it.
Yeah, because that mural is actually of like vibrantly colored tree roots.
Right.
So it's like supposed to be a play on, of course, the street name, and also like really convey like a really interesting sense of the Bronx's natural habitat.
Right. You know, I started this little section here by saying, gee whiz, maybe we could do this everywhere. You know, in terms of you understanding the mechanics of how this went, really, given the number of artists we have all over the borough, the number of great muralists there are, can't we do this wouldn't this be amazing to literally transform some of the kind of worst looking neighborhoods in exactly this way, and you know, even get artists a little more work? I mean, what could be wrong with that? Maybe I'm a dreamer. What do you think? You like I'm sure you like the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a nice idea. It's just that obviously, given like a lot of like different areas, the artist would of course have to get permission first from the community board representing that area, and it would be ultimately up to the community board.
Yeah, so that's what it is to go through a community board. I hate to put it this way. I'd love to find the community board that would turn something like that down. You know, I mean, it just, Robert, you and I, we both look at the borough of the Bronx and whatever we can see to do to improve things. And certainly from my perspective, I'm always interested in supporting the arts and supporting artists. I just think this is win-win. And when I saw that Community Board 11 did it, and congrats to Lovey for bringing up the idea, I just think it's just fantastic. And I wish there are so many neighborhoods that I go through and I say, gee whiz, clean that up in, I don't want to say 2 seconds because it takes some work, but I think it would be great. Anyway, I want to talk to you about something else, and that is this idea of human host. Who is human host? What is this performance that's either happened or happening? Give us a little background about the story you wrote.
Oh, sure. So Human Host is actually an experimental pop group created by Mike Apicella. So he's actually like the main creative core behind the band itself, and it changes a lot. People come in and add to this like very interesting sound. So Mike himself, he actually performs with a keyboard and harmonica, and it's like almost like synthesized. So it gives like this like very like almost like trippy kind of like almost like extraterrestrial sound to it.
Ooh.
Yeah. And they actually he released a new album last year, and pretty much like I listened to the album and kind of gave like my sense of like what I thought of it. And
so come on, give us the review. What did you think of it?
Well, I thought it was actually a very interesting sound. It's definitely something that I don't think like most people might appreciate. Like some might not. So it might not be like everybody's cup of tea, but it's a very interesting sound. Like I would suggest just kind of going in with an open mind and listening to it, and just like really let the music speak to you.
How can you find it? How do we find it? The Human Host.
Sure.
I guess you can Google it, right, and pull it right up, right?
Yeah, well, they have an official Tumblr page, which is www.humanhost.tumblr.com. And you can actually purchase their new album, Special Moments with Munkle Flugga and the Crunk, at Spotify.
I'm sorry. I would love.
excuse
me. I would love to invent names like Munkle Flugga and the Crunk. I just can't imagine that. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I just when and I'm looking at it right in front of me. Muckle Flugga and the Crunk. That's me and you, right? I'm Muckle Flugga, and my buddy Robert is the Crunk. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, actually, a very interesting tidbit.
Wait. Let's just finish that. You said they're on Spotify, iTunes, Tidal, Bandcamp, and other streaming sites.
And other streaming sites. That's correct. So an interesting little fact: Muckle Flugga and the Crunk are actually like islands right near Scotland.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So there you go.
So that's actually where the name comes from. But pretty much like the name of the album, it just like really best like encapsulates like their sound. It's like very mysterious, almost makes you like, what is that about? And like then you go into it and you just try to figure out like what's going on.
Now he is from Maryland, right? But then now, and they're operating in the Bronx. I guess that's what made it relevant to you and to the Bronx Times.
Well, they actually used to be like in the Bronx. They used to live in Fordham and Hunts Point while they were working on an album.
Right.
It was actually a different album, not the one that just came out, but a previous album. And they're looking to come back to the Bronx to perform actually next month in August 30th. They haven't decided like the venue or when, like what time it will be, but they're definitely looking to come back to the Bronx and pretty much show like Bronxites like a really like interesting sound that they have.
Wow. Listen, Robert, absolutely fascinating. You look at the range of stuff that we did. We talked about the opening of a park. We talked about the creation of very unusual and new music, and also about fighting graffiti with. It's almost like fighting graffiti with graffiti. With a mural. Anything else coming up? You working on anything interesting that we would want to know about?
Sure. Let's see. So I actually just wrote an article on Deborah Eiselman. I believe you know her.
Oh, I know Debbie. Yeah, sure.
So like I wrote about her and her newest novel she just released, The Portrait of Desperation, and and I pretty much just like gave like a bit of information about that novel as well as like her time working as within the arts. It was a very interesting story.
She's a very compelling figure and a wonderful writer and a wonderful person. Listen, Robert Wirsing at the Bronx Times, thank you so much, and we appreciate your time. Say hello to all my buddies over there, and we'll see you around the borough of the Bronx. Thanks for the great work that you do.
Will do, and thank you so much again, Gary.
Great, be well. All right, there we go. That is the end of our program this evening. And let's see, what do we got Monday night on Bronx Talk? We will be talking about local parks. And not the big ones, not Pelham Bay and not Van Cortlandt, but we'll be talking about what it takes to keep local parks thriving and keeping local neighborhoods happy. Otherwise, that's it. Good night. See you next week.